Hey, what's up? Welcome to Memory Lane. My name is Source of Food, and this is the channel where we talk about childhood memories. Memories as they were back in the early 60s when I was born, and memories going into the 70s and somewhat and the 80s somewhat. Yeah. So I grew up in Jamaica and grew up with my grandparents, as a matter of fact. And one of the person who I admired quite a bit as a kid was my granddad. He was kind of the father figure at home, right? Never knew my dad until maybe I was around 11, 12. So I grew up with my grandparents. Now, you might have had someone who you you grew up with, and you kind of admire the way they operate, the things that they did. The experiences or the things that you watch them do at the time helped you somewhat, to develop your own common sense and the way things were done, as a kid, right? So I learned quite a bit from my granddad, quite a bit from him. So I want to talk about something that I used to see him do, which kind of left me in somewhat of an awe and a little bit of shock, so, somewhat. So my granddad, he had this thing at home. He had this piece of tool. It was quite heavy. It was about maybe 20, 25 inches, maybe about 30 inches long, right? And he called it the clamp. The clamp, yes. So it had two handles, right? And at the other end, it had something like this, right? Something like this. When you press on the handles, then this part comes together and closes very tight, very very tight. This area was made of metal, right? Okay, so he had this thing at home, and I think we would ask, we would say to him, say, Dada, what is that? And he would say, that's the clamp. And what I would ask him, what do you use it for? He said, that's to clamp the goats. Yeah, that's to clamp the goats. That's to clamp the ram goat. But we still never got the concept. We still never understood what he meant by that. So one day, I saw him took it up, and he went to where this goat was tied. We had this big ram goat. Back in those days, a lot of Jamaicans had. Even today, people still rear goats for domestic purposes, for meat. A butcher, you'd butcher a ram, make some curried goat and rice and peas, or curry goat and white rice, or whatever, manish water, yeah. So, but people had goats at home, and they would keep goats, for domestic purposes, for meat purposes, and to sell, to earn some money from. And as a kid, I can recall that, when you had a male goat or some male animal around the place, especially dogs, you never want them to get too involved. If you can help it, for them to get too involved sexually with the female dogs around the place. I mean, you couldn't help it, because most of the dogs around the place, they were untethered. It's not like here in Canada where your dogs are kept inside. Back home, growing up back into the 60s, dogs were running all over the place. People had dogs at home for to guard their property, or that, for whatever reason. And dogs were not tethered per se. People who had really fierce guard dogs would have, maybe their property enclosed if they could afford that, or they would be enclosed in a shed or whatever, a dog house, in the dog house, um, for the day. And they would be let out at night. Anyway, let's get back to the point. But you wouldn't want the male dog to kind of get the female ones pregnant, too often, because you're going to end up with too many pups, right? And I think it was the same thing with, I wouldn't say it was exactly the same thing with goats, right? But sometimes you just want to just temper, temper the what's the right word? The virility of the ram goat. So my dad took up this he took up this piece of tool one day, and he went over to where this goat was tied, man, and he I can't recall if he asked us, myself and my younger brother, to hold the goat down, or how he did it. I can't recall how it was done. But anyway, he got this piece of tool, and he got the clamp section around the testicle of the goat, right? The upper part of the testicle close to the body, right? And he positioned it there. And I think maybe 2 or 3 of us held the goat down, and he clamped on it with all his might, and then the goat was meh, meh, meh. Yeah, and he held it there for some time. And man, as kids, we were wondering, why is he doing this? But then as I grew up, as I got older, I realized that this piece of tool was a castration, or a castration tool. What he was actually doing was actually castrating the ram goat, the ram, so that the goat could not get the ewes, that ram could not get the ewes pregnant. But looking back, it seemed to be such a painful process, clamping on the upper part of the testicle like this. I guess what it did, it kind of cut off the sperm. How you use your imagination. It cut the flow of the sperm, from the testicle to the penis, right? I guess that's what it did. So it was a castrating tool. But apart from that, that was not the only form of castration that I saw my grandfather did. He had this ratchet knife. If you grew up in Jamaica back in the 60s and into the 70s, the ratchet knife was a very common, should I call it a weapon? Because in many cases, it was used as a weapon. But anyway, it was a pocket knife, quite large. The handle was about 5 inches, handle and blade maybe around 5 inches. Yeah. So many young guys, many young men had this knife. This was called a ratchet knife. And a lot of guys would flick it. This knife was a dangerous knife. I think it was outlawed, or it was not. The government had stopped importing it in the country. But if you grew up back in those days, 60s, 70s, you would know the ratchet knife, right? So my grandfather had one. And he used this knife. I would see him get some of these if there was a dog in the community that someone wanted to castrate the dog. I think back here in Canada, you would take the male dog to the vet to get the dog fixed. That is, I think that's what they mean when they said, you're gonna get the dog fixed. You take it to the vet to get it fixed. But anyway, back then it was a little bit more crude. That the method that I saw. I'm not saying this was a common method in Jamaica, right? This was what was done locally by, the everyday person living in rural Jamaica. I'm assuming that's how it was done. So my grandfather, would catch the dog, maybe tie up the dog or whoever, hold the dog down, make sure the dog, can't get to bite you, and he would use that knife and castrate the dog, remove the testicles from the dog, man. Man, it seems so barbaric, because it's not like, the areas where the testicles were removed were stitched up back or anything. It was just left like that, and the dog would nurse it, would lick it until it was healed up completely. But yeah, those are some of the things, not some of the things. That was one thing I saw my grandfather did, that as a kid it was really shocking and left me in awe at times. Yeah. But back to the first tool though, the one that was used to castrate the goat. I mean, it was not used just for goats. It was used for cows, maybe for sheep, not for pigs. But that was the tool of choice that was used back then to castrate, goats and cows, or should I say the bulls and the rams, right? I can recall that we lent that tool, or he lent that tool to a gentleman in the community, and it never came back. As far as I can recall, that tool never came back. I am close to 60 now. I was less than 10 back then, and I can still recall like yesterday who the person whom he lent that piece of tool was, and he never got it back. But that's the way it is. Sometimes you lend out your tool to people, and you don't get it back for whatever reason. But yeah, so what were some of the memories? What are some of the memories you might have had of your granddad, or maybe your dad, or maybe your uncle, someone who you grew up with? What were some of the things that you saw them did that maybe as a kid left you in a bit of you found a bit shocking and surprising and left you speechless, if you know what I mean? Tell me about it. Leave a comment here, leave me a comment in the comment section below. And I love to hear, because I have a lot to talk about, man. A whole lot of memories. This is just one of them. If you like these kind of videos, looking back, at the childhood memories and all of that, childhood experiences, subscribe to the channel. And just so you don't miss when I upload a new video, hit the bell, right? The notification bell, and you'll get a notification every time I upload a new video, right? So subscribe, hit the like button, hit the notification bell. So until we talk again, Sosa Food here, and we're going down memory lane. All right? Take it easy.